I have a low spice tolerance. I know. Me? Shocking. But really, I can't walk through the spice aisle at my ShopRite. So, you can imagine my reaction when, upon walking into my local Buffalo Wild Wings, my father suggested we all split a plate of the hottest wings they had. Unbridled enthusiasm. Let me tell you, enthusiasm was definitely bridled. But you only live once. Might as well have some fun. No, it was not fun. It was the exact opposite of fun. My tongue was incinerated. For 30 minutes, I sat there, powerless, wanting nothing more than sweet release. I left that restaurant numb and humbled. To this day, my body trembles at the thought of eating another chicken wing. But you only live once. And though I may have slightly embellished this story, it's still an experience I'll get to look back and laugh at. And that's all we could ever hope for, right? Creating lasting memories, growing old and having them to reminisce about. But as we all march towards our inevitable ends, I find that we rarely have conversations about how to deal with mortality. As such, we collectively view it as an evil that should not be discussed. Now, don't get me wrong. Death can certainly be tragic, but it often isn't. And I fear that we prevent ourselves from living lives to their fullest just to avoid any confrontation with death. Psychologist Rachel Menzies writes that thoughts of death can create a sense of powerlessness, loneliness, and meaninglessness, and may seriously undermine one's experience of happiness or peace. So today, we'll first bite into how we deal with mortality. Then, we'll chew on the negative effects of our unhealthy attitudes. And finally, we'll desperately guzzle some milk and find a solution. It's obvious why death is scary. We have no control over it. We don't know how or when it'll happen, just that it's inevitable. Health studies professor Dr. David Sanfilippo writes that death is viewed as an encroachment on life instead of part of life. This attitude causes us to perceive a natural event as something to be feared or avoided. Just look at Calico, the Google startup founded in 2013 that looked to reverse aging. It got more than $1 billion in funding, but have yet to find that fountain of youth. Then there's Brian Johnson, the tech billionaire that swaps blood with his son to look young. Billionaire vampire, not on my 2023 bingo card. Even in our movies, you can see this obsession with avoiding our demise. The second highest domestic grossing film of all time was about overcoming death, when, in reality, and this might be a bad take, Thanos was right. And if we're not evading death, we're evading the thought of death. Yair Zor-Dieterman of Bar-Ilan University found that when exposed to images of ourselves next to words like burial or funeral, the predictive centers in our brain completely shut down. And, like other issues like racism, wars, school lunches, we minimize death with humor. Just think about all the times you heard someone say that they'd die if somebody proposed to them in sweatpants, or that they'd kill themselves if you posted that photo of them. We try our best to trivialize an experience that should shape the way we live our lives. Our unhealthy relationship with death is more than just a quirk of the mind, though. It affects the way we live and die. In the 1990s, Canadian activist Sue Rodriguez was diagnosed with ALS. Knowing her fate and not wanting to see herself waste away, she sought a physician to end her life. But euthanasia was illegal. She pleaded to the government for an exemption, arguing, "If I cannot consent to my death, whose body is this? Who owns my life?" She lost the case 5-4. Sue died 2 years later. In pain. In vain. When we prolong life at any cost, it only causes unnecessary suffering in our most vulnerable people. And In a country where only 10 of 50 states have legalized euthanasia, this problem still plagues our nation. Our incessant avoidance of death also places a logistical burden on already grieving families, as writer Sophia Lorenzi knows well. When her father died in 2018, she was suddenly plunged into a world of incomprehensible jargon. In the 5 days between his death and funeral, she had to decipher the difference between a coffin and a casket, an heir or a beneficiary, whether to inter or intern her father's ashes. But that marked just the beginning of the 2 years it took her to get her father's affairs in order. All while still in shock. All while still grieving. And she isn't alone. Less than a half of Americans over the age of 55 even have a will. Fewer than a third have an advance directive for end-of-life care, and only 7% have pre-planned their funeral. The truth is, not planning for death only begets more pain and stress for your loved ones, and ignoring death only prevents us from doing so. But when confronted by death, everything changes. In 2019, my mother got seriously sick, and death suddenly became so real. For the first time in my life, I had to consider the possibility of losing someone I love. I wished for more time. I wished I could have said I love you more often. I wished I could have been a better son. And it hurt. It hurt to know that I had taken the time I had with her for granted. It hurt to realize that one day I would have to live my life without her. Fortunately, after some time, she recovered. But the wishes persisted. I still spend every second I have with her. I still tell her I love you every chance I get, because I don't want to wish like that ever again. Confronting death in such a personal manner made me realize that we truly take our lives for granted. And I'm not the only one. Brownie Ware, a palliative care nurse, spent years caring for patients who were on their deathbeds. In moments of clarity, they expressed regrets. Regrets of not living life to the fullest. Regrets of living a life of stress instead of one of happiness. In the end, people tend to realize that they've been living wrong. And I think it's time we stop waiting till it's too late to appreciate the life we have. So let's start from square one. We all know death is unavoidable, but we don't have to avoid it. Psychotherapist Joe Nash states that coming to terms with death is essential to living life fully. We have to find a way to live with purpose, without the fears of mortality getting in the way. And the best way to do that is to get close to death. Now, don't go kissing corpses, but think about your mortality. Have calm, reflective moments where you can expose yourself to it, remind yourself of it, and plan for it. Write your will, arrange your funeral, and get your affairs in order so that your family won't be burdened by logistics while grieving. But, most importantly, replace your apprehension with appreciation. Appreciate your finite being. Appreciate the fragility of life, that aging is a privilege. But most of all, appreciate the legacy you leave. While our bodies may be mortal, our legacy is eternal. So leave the best one you can. And the best part is, we don't have to do anything extra for legacy. It consists of every action, every transaction, every interaction you make. You're doing it right now. We have the rest of our lives to make something that we and our children can be proud of. You only live once. Spend your life wisely. Ever since that fateful chicken dinner, I'm slowly becoming more and more accustomed to spice. Heck, just yesterday I actually salted my butter. I'm taking every opportunity I have to grow and learn and pass on my spice survival tactics to my children. But that's the beauty of life. Our stumbles will be forgotten, but we can use our experiences to make the world a better place. So let's do that. What are we waiting for? Death?